Hey everybody, I am Janie Milioto and this is my Finance 451 backtesting project. So basically the purpose of this project was to choose a theory, write a hypothesis, and then backtest that hypothesis. As you can see here, I chose 45 companies to test. I chose 45 companies because I figured 30 companies would be a good sample size, but I just wanted to add a couple more in there to make sure my regression, wasn't biased. So I wanted to see if a company's price to book ratio was related to its return on equity. In other words, my hypothesis is that if a company has a high price to book ratio, it will also have a high return on equity. To test this, I ran a regression. I used return on equity as my y or dependent variable, and I used price to book ratio as my x or independent variable. As we all know, return on equity is a profitability ratio. It shows how much profit each dollar of common stockholders' equity generates. On the other hand, the price to book ratio compares a company's market value to its book value. So you would think that a high price to book ratio would lead to a high return on equity. Well, let's find out. Like I said earlier, to test my hypothesis, I ran a regression. If we look at this number right here, we can see that the R squared is nearly 90%. This is saying that 90% of the variation in the Y data is due to variation in the X data. Having a high R squared shows that my data points are very close to the line. If we look at this number right here, the multiple R, this is the correlation coefficient. As you can see, it is 0.95, which is telling me that return on equity and price to book ratio are for sure highly correlated. If we look at these two numbers down here, my y equals mx plus b equation would be y equals 117.38x minus 31.86. The t statistic is much greater than 1.6, so this indicates that the coefficient is highly significant with 95% confidence. So I believe after running a regression and backtesting my hypothesis, which was if a company has a high price to book ratio, it will also have a high return on equity, I can conclude that a company's price to book ratio is definitely highly correlated with its return on equity.